for our national conference just up the road, so it's I didn't think I'd be back quite as soon, but it's evident I can find my way about Sheffield, so that's quite nice. And today I'm going to talk to you about the transformation and thinking outside the box when you're thinking about study abroad opportunities. So first I'm going to tell you a story about a student who actually went through this programme and kind of her journey through it. For me it's quite powerful, so bear with me. So one of the most inspiring stories that I've heard lately is of Deborah Kirk. She's a hospitality student from Cumbernauld College. For you that don't know where that is, it's not that far outside Glasgow. Deborah went on a work placement as part of the Leonardo da Vinci European programme for exchange for technical students to a Michelin star restaurant. Quite fancy, and that was in Lyon. Now I don't know if you've ever been in a Michelin star restaurant, but they do this thing, it's called frayed crab. Don't even know what that is, but it sounds quite exciting. And this is the sort of place where the wine's more expensive than a pair of designer shoes, really. And she spent 3 weeks working there and living there. And since France, this remarkable young woman has gone on from strength to strength, gaining her City and Guilds qualification, and then entered and won the Young Chef of the Year 2011. But she says that she owes a lot to the programme in which she went for her confidence and the time that she spent in France. She said, if it hadn't have been for Leonardo, I wouldn't have had the confidence to even enter the competition, but never even mind winning it. These types of stories really drive the work that we are currently doing at NUS Scotland. And NUS Scotland has been funded to deliver on funding staffed international work for about 5 years now. And the work we've been delivering came from a project initially funded by the Scottish Government to engage students in the Bologna process. I'll come back to Bologna later, but for now this led to more funding and eventually a large-scale project which engaged international students in representation, and that was called Students Without Borders. As part of Student Without Borders project in 2010, NUS Scotland ran a conference called Promoting the Student International Experience. This brought together students and university staff for the first time to discuss Bologna and study abroad opportunities, like the ones that I've just mentioned. Students came up with a proposal to have a year of study abroad that included work on the following areas: cultural awareness raising, supporting the international learning experience at institution level, fostering graduate attributes through study abroad, and that this should be approached on a sector-wide basis. So this declaration was turned into a much negotiated proposal that was agreed and funded by the Scottish Government, and the project has now started. We're about to commence the year of study abroad, which is called Scotland Goes Global. You probably wonder why, we're working on this. Well, the initial motivation came from the government asking us as NUS to do work on issues around this and providing funding. The government needed student engagement in the Bologna process, which we now have. And the Bologna process has been going now for over 10 years. And it aims to set Europe up as the world's most competitive, knowledge-based economy to compete with the US in terms of attracting international students. So far, the work on the number of areas including curriculum frameworks, quality assurance, 3-year degree cycles and systems, and recognising qualifications, within all which Scotland does actually quite well. The only thing where we do not do so well is mobility, otherwise known as study abroad. So just let me set a bit of context to this. Around 30% of German students study abroad as part of their course. 25% of French and Spanish students. And now Scottish students study abroad represents less than 1% of all our students in Scotland, which is just, it's ridiculous. And although that it has increased and it's went up by 8% last year, this increase is only 95 students. These numbers are really quite low. Other countries where mobility is increasing, such as Cyprus and Estonia, they're up by 38% and 31% retrospectively. So as you can see, that's a significant jump from 1%, up 8% to 38%. There's a massive disparity there. There are plenty of reasons that students don't want to study abroad, including cost, personal circumstances, as well as lack of language skills. But it's up to us in the education sector to make this happen for them. The cost is the most common barrier. Well, civil engineer students at one of our universities called Napier, just outside Edinburgh, raise money for a whole year to participate in an international seminar every year. The Erasmus grant is now around €2,000. Grants, loans, travel costs can be covered for students going abroad further afield than Europe. And we decided to have what's called global ambassadors. So these are students who have studied abroad, that have had that experience, so they can then go out and speak to other students and try and engage students, and also staff, getting involved, talking about Erasmus, but also talking about like the benefits and what their experiences have been. And 2 out of 5 of our ambassadors actually made up the money they actually made money on their year abroad. And there's also additional support for disabled students as well. Universities and colleges know that they do not have to put up academic barriers that already exist. We have evidence from our study in Georgia that grades of students who took part in the American Junior Year Abroad, they actually improved on returning from study abroad. For language students, well, it's a no-brainer really. But one of our institutions actually doesn't even send language students abroad. I find that really bizarre. In this economy of experience, there are clearly winners and losers. One of the most recent and interesting studies to date has come from HEFCE, who have carried out a detailed survey of those students who have undertaken a placement and or study abroad period during their studies. This showed that students who hadn't undertaken study abroad period or a placement could expect to receive a lower medium and mean salary than those who had. Moreover, for me that really points out like how important study abroad can actually be. And it's pointed to a slightly enhanced potential for being either in further study or employed 6 months after graduating for those who had been abroad compared to those who haven't. Therefore, efforts to merely increase these numbers without thought to the underlying causes of non-participation may serve to reinforce the traditional demographic. So what we found as the demographic of students that actually study abroad is white, female, middle class students with at least one parent who had been a graduate from a higher education institution. It's also increasingly led to the development of a two-tier system of graduates. And this economy of experience between those who are able to afford to study abroad or gain unpaid internship experience, and those who haven't had the resources to. In other words, the students who have struggled to make their way through university are those that are now struggling to get meaningful employment afterwards. This is why the provision of short-term mobility windows are essential to widening this far too narrow demographic, not least because they often provide an entry point for long-term studies abroad, and justifies a full investigation to incorporate short-term mobility windows with specific measurable learning outcomes into all programmes of curricula, with an alternative to exploring funding or through the student funding activities. Also exploring funding that currently exists, but also, you know, to go on kind of what Nikki said, you know, that partnership between students and institutions, between institutions and external stakeholders, but, you know, the partnership, like, all together. There can be a lot that's said for the partnership. This will serve for more widespread development of the current two-tier graduate population. Those who can afford to undertake study abroad and those who can't. Through our research, now I will have this kind of about today so that you can have a look at it. This is our research that we done. Some of the facts and figures are quite staggering, and we also done a lot of consultation work with employers as well. So I'll have these about today, and you can have a look at them, and we can also get copies, you know, sent down as well. Through our project, the research in further education and higher education, staff members were convinced of the real benefits and the transformation effect of short-term study abroad periods. I would like to put it to you that we cannot afford not to be lobbying institutions to do more to get students learning in an international context. We are living in a global economy, and we are interlinked like we've never been before. If you have a bank collapse in the USA, you see food riots in Africa. If you have an outbreak of avian flu in Brazil, in less than 24 hours, it will have spread to Charles de Gaulle Airport. So that's just really highlighting, you know, how much everything moves about so much these days. And I would urge you that by not giving our students this opportunity to build a global network, we are denying them future opportunities. And I would put it to you that we cannot afford not to get on board with this. Students from other countries, of whom our graduates have to now compete with, have the experience and are multilingual. I know of an IT company in Dunfermline. Now they have 12 employees that works in 6 time zones and 4 continents, and they employ graduates. Don't our students from all backgrounds deserve this opportunity too? So this is about an opportunity and realising someone's potential, just like Deborah, who I mentioned, and the power behind that story. So Scotland is going global, and let's make sure the rest of the UK goes global too. Thanks. Now, I didn't do a presentation, and I kept the speech quite short because I'm probably sure you have questions. So be nice, but I'm willing to take any questions. Yes.
Obviously, every university in the room has fabulous opportunities for students, and the most difficult thing that I think we all face is how do we communicate most effectively with the students for them to be able to take these opportunities? So from your experience, what did you find was the best way to get students, A, to find out about this or to know about it, and then to encourage them to get involved with going abroad and taking that big scary step?
Well, for me, I think within Britain, like, we don't talk about these opportunities at an earlier level. Like, we don't, I mean, I've never even heard the word university. I've never been to university. I studied in college. So I think we need to be getting into schools. I think we need to be talking to, you know, these young students before they even become students, when they're pupils at school. Like, you know, for me, it says massive amounts if we can get in there when they're young enough, you know, so before they start picking their subjects. So, you know, when they're getting in there, and you can explain that, you know, you don't have to just stay in, you know, Scotland. You don't have to just stay in England. You know, you can move about, you know, across the border. You know, you can go to Europe. You can go further afield than that. And, you know, language is not always a barrier. There's a lot of programmes out there that actually you can go and study in English, but it's getting that international experience. So I think there's a lot to do there. We've started a programme going into schools, and we actually have like an online module for schools, high school pupils to sign up to. And when we launched this research, we done a massive launch day to certain areas in Scotland, to the high schools, to come along, the pupils who were picking their, you know, they've just picked their subjects, or were just picking their subjects, and some of the kind of older pupils who were just about to leave, to go on to college or university within the kind of next year. So I think that's very powerful, getting into schools, but also I think it's about, you know, spreading the word out there. And when you're talking about how to engage your students on campus, I think there's a lot to be said by working in partnership with your student association or your students' union. And, you know, when, you know, the student union are giving talks, or, you know, induction, you know, what's wrong with sticking a wee leaflet in the induction pack to say, hey, did you know you can study abroad as part of your course? But a lot can be said for short-term mobility. When you talk about study abroad, everybody automatically thinks, oh, gap year, or a year. Oh my God, like, I can't do that. I've just moved to this area, I've got a flat, I've got childcare responsibilities, I've got caring responsibilities. I can't just leave all that and, you know, go backpacking for a year, or, you know, go to another institution. So I think looking at short-term mobility, but then the next big question after short-term, you know, when we're talking about short-term mobility, is how do we credit that? Because at the moment, Leonardo, and there's one other that I can never remember the name of. Helen will kill me when I get back to Scotland. And the Erasmus, they're the only ones that are really credited. So it's about, you know, how can we give those students who decide to take time out of study for work opportunities, for internships, obviously preferred paid internships, but that opportunity, that how do we give them something back? So we need to be looking at how can we regulate short-term mobility. For me, it's having, you know, some sort of short-term mobility regulator, however we want to call that. But there could be massive benefits. Like, I mean, one of our universities, 89% of their outward mobility is not recorded because it's not a year abroad. It's short-term mobility. So 3 weeks, a month, 3 months, you know, that's short-term mobility. And why do we not credit that? Because actually, as I said, you know, in the speech, that can go a long way to actually fully engaging a student and taking them on that journey to actually get them to study a year abroad. So that's kind of the key points that kind of we focus on, and we're actually starting to see that, you know, it's picking up. So fingers crossed. Any other questions? No? Yeah? That's fine.
Stacey, it seems to me that the figures are even worse than you suggest, because most of the outward mobility of the students from UK universities, in my experience, is the international students who are with us, who are going out and coming back. So, you know, the actual UK students are less representative than even figures suggest. Seems to me your suggestion about getting the students to talk to the students is really powerful. And what I would really love is a series of stories of whether it be on video or whether it be just to read, because I think, some old git saying it's a good thing for you to do is just not going to work, is it? And therefore, we need students to talk to students about the benefits, and preferably also people who are maybe 2 or 3 years out of university talking about the benefits. And I just wondered if you tried any of that, or you're aware of anywhere that's done that, or are there any resources that we can tap into where that's available?
So you're 100% right. The figures for instance, in Scotland, for Scottish domiciled students who actually take up study abroad, that's that 1% I was talking about. The mobility figure is a lot higher, but the majority of that is made up of international students. So coming over to Scotland to study their degree, and then as part of their course then go somewhere else in Europe to study a year abroad. So the figures for UK domiciled but also Scottish domiciled students studying abroad is just, it's staggering how low it actually is. The second part of your question, we did do video interviews with students about their experience when they studied abroad. When I get back up, I'll quite happily send the video down to Viv, and you're free to have a look at that. And the stories I've literally got goosebumps that they're that powerful. And hearing other students, it's that peer to peer, isn't it? And also I'm a firm believer of you cannot be what you cannot see. So if you can't see, another student who's, like you, roughly the same age as you, going to study abroad, then how can you even imagine to put yourself in that sort of situation? And also there's a lot of questions around studying abroad. It's how do we eliminate, oh my God, it costs an absolute fortune, and I'm not going to get that money. Where can I get that money from? So it's really about saying, well, actually, these are the options. And obviously, with the EU and the European Parliament just now actually looking at Erasmus and learning for all and what that actually is. And it was quite encouraging. We've just been to Belgium as part of the work that we do in the international section. And to hear the European Union standing in front of us saying we are now looking at short-term mobility, it was amazing. I'm like, yay, and this is part of my job because I'm the lead officer on this project. So it's really exciting to see that. So peer-to-peer, definitely. Videos, vlogs, it's the new thing. I think it's vlogs. This is a new thing. Things like this, case studies are really, really important, and having that base to say, well, if someone comes to you and says, I want to study abroad, you can go, well, here's an online resource that you can look at. Here's an online module you could do, or here's some videos you could look at. And then that way you're kind of hitting all the different areas. If you're a visual learner or you're more kind of written learner, you're kind of working for both there. So I hope that answers your question. I'll take the woman at the back first.
It's interesting what you're saying about the European Parliament, because I've heard so many conflicting things about Erasmus in recent months. First of all, I heard that they didn't have enough money because they'd been borrowing from next year's budget, and then there wouldn't be Erasmus funding. Then they confirmed there would be for this year, but then maybe not for next year. And then I heard that they were going to expand it to even further. And have you heard anything?
So we were in Belgium, in Brussels. When was it? This is April. March. We were away in March. And this is a kind of yearly thing that we do. We go away over there and kind of catch up with what they're up to. And they were saying to us that they did have funding for this year, which is quite exciting, and I think they should. But also it's this short-term mobility that I know I'm going on and on about it, but this is really important. It doesn't cost that money, that amount of money to fund short-term mobility, because obviously it's shorter. But we need to look at around what that looks like. So when they were saying that they are reviewing what Erasmus is, and quite rightly so. I mean, if a student, decides to take that life-altering step and say, I'm going to study abroad, but then has to wait months before the funding comes through. Like, if we're talking about engaging students, that's one way to disengage them, which again, could be a massive barrier, of hearsay of what other students have heard. Oh, it's taken me, 6 months to get funding, or it's taken me 3 weeks, or whatever that looks like. So as far as I know, they're looking at it. They do have funding for it. But I also think businesses should be buying back into education. If employers are saying that they would like people with bilingual skills, or internationalisation experience, then why are businesses not getting on board with this? That's a question I pose to you. I'm not going to answer it, but that's a question that I pose to you as well. I hope that answers your question. I don't know any more. We've not had any more updates. Sorry.
My just sort of contribution to the discussion. Really, I'm speaking with two hats on. One is I work with the student union at Sheffield University, and I'm engaged in a big involving students. And also as a mum of an Erasmus student who's currently out in Prague. I'm going to visit her on Thursday. Very exciting. But just with my work hat on, we're trying to get our student union to really sort of move on this, and we've got a big open space event taking place next week, and we've got 150 people hopefully signing up, mainly the vast majority of those students, and we're targeting home students. And I think at Sheffield, I know we've been quite successful with the outward mobility. I think we're in the sort of highest, I don't know, about top 10 in the UK. But I still think you're absolutely right that there are huge swathes of students who are just not getting it, or not getting the opportunities. And reflecting on my own daughter, who's at another institution in the northeast, and not a Russell Group university, I hasten to add. And I think the opportunities are fewer and far between. There were only 2 places in her whole of her faculty to go. And, there was this sense that, yes, she was in that demographic where she'd got mum perhaps saying, think about it. But at the end of the day, I think we've got to be pushing, and certainly from a student union perspective, I would be taking that back, the whole notion of these short-term opportunities, because I think she was scared before she went, but she had an advantage. She'd already travelled, and I think it is that kind of big step. How do you then overcome that fear factor? And I think we've got a lot to do in helping our young people feel confident.
And that is a key point. If you've never been out the country, how can you even dream about going away for a year? But, I'd be absolutely terrified.
With Skype, I can actually physically, she's in a pretty dire accommodation, but she's coping with it. But she can just show me around the room, and you can see she's okay and stuff like that, and it's actually really reassuring. So we have got a lot of technology to help us know that it's going to be okay, and capturing that. So maybe the peer-to-peer stuff, I will be encouraging her to do a video blog about it, so that when she comes back, she'll be encouraging other students.
And things like when students go on Erasmus, I'm doing a video diary of forever, however long they're away, if they are only away for 3 weeks, doing it every day, but if they're away for a year, then, they could do it once a month, or, it's just something to come back. But also, that's a way to basically, record the time out of their studies, or if they're studying abroad or they're working abroad, whatever that looks like. It's also a way to record it and say, well, actually, in my gap year, or in my study abroad year, or whatever that looks like, this is what I done. And talking through their experience, because actually, when they come back, if you come back and maybe you have been in dire accommodation but you've managed to do it, you come back and you show these videos to someone else, and a crowd like this, and you see someone, sitting in the back row with a huge big smile on their face going, and you can see the pennies dropped, and they're sitting and they're like, right, and then they speak to you at the end and they say, do you know what, thanks very much, I really want to go and do this. Word of mouth is probably the biggest selling point. But I think it also goes back to schools as well. We've seen cuts to languages. No more 2+2. And languages in primary schools, but also then going on to high school. I studied 2 languages at school. I'm pretty rubbish at them now, right enough. But I have those qualifications of studying 2 languages. I wouldn't be confident to go and, you know, have the confidence to go and stay in a country. But that again, you know, that eliminates the barriers. But if we're not teaching it while they're young, like, you know, there needs to be like measures in each level. So, you know, if we're not teaching it in primary schools, we should teach it in high schools. And then, you know, if they miss it there, it should be in colleges and universities, so that, you know, they do have it. I think more wide publicity about it, having it on the website of your university or college, you know, having it on the student website of the Students' Union, having posters promoting it, doing events, you know, like, you know, having international flags up. Like, literally the amount of people I've seen walking in here this morning going, what's going on here? Like, when they've seen all the international flags up, you know, like, for me, like, it's just something like that can draw people's attention, because all you need to do is draw them in, and once you've got them in the door, you've then got time to explain to them what it is and the benefits of it. So, I'll take yourself, then you. Yeah.
Hi, good morning. I think from my point of view, there's a greater barrier than engaging the student. It's also engaging the senior management in understanding how it's important that we actually encourage the student to go abroad. But when I say encourage, I almost mean force them to go abroad. Because I trained in a business school in France over 10 years ago, almost 15 years ago, and already then, and for years before that, it was compulsory as part of our course to go abroad. It's not something that we had the choice of, it's something that was compulsory. And it was the same in Spain, the same in Germany. And England and Scotland maybe is just 10 years late. But it's not only about giving the choices to the students, it's about making the internationalization as part of the curriculum and getting the academics to actually understand that it needs to be embedded in the curriculum that the student go abroad. And then on your website you can say, by the end of your course you will speak fluent French or fluent Spanish or fluent German, because you will have had this compulsory experience. And I think universities should sort of see it as a competitive advantage to actually put it on their website, that the student will see they will have this international experience. Everybody says you have opportunities to, but then there's the barriers, and then you leave it to the student, and the student think, oh, well, I don't speak the lingo, oh, I don't have the money, so I'm just not going to do it, I'm just going to go and get drunk for 3 years. Because that's how the young students speak or think. And I feel that if there was more of an engagement from senior academics and senior members of management staff at universities in the UK and maybe in Scotland, we wouldn't be where we're at now.
And I think that links into the gentleman's comment, that yourselves comment. Like, how do we do that? Case studies. Like, you know, it depends on what way you look at it. For me, if you do, well, I'll speak their lingo, qualitative and quantitative data. Like, if they want it, give them it. Like, you go down the road of having case studies, blogs, you know, vlogs now. You know, if you have all that, but you also have, you know, research to back it up, like, you know, how can anyone argue? Like, I find it really difficult now, like, for anyone to come up.
What I've been facing this year in working in my institution is with the pressure of student recruitment targets. One of my managers said, oh my God, we're struggling to get them here, and as soon as they're here, you want to send them away. Well, yeah, actually, you know?
Well, there's other ways of looking at it. There's exchange programmes and all that we've been doing for years. Like, you know, you do it in school, in some schools and all that. And making it compulsory, I do think, is the way forward. I do think that every student should have this opportunity to go and study abroad. I personally would love to see it, and, you know, that it was compulsory. I mean, part of the problem we've got, language students, it's not even compulsory in all of their courses. That's a massive issue. My best friend studied international business and something at Stirling University, and as part of her degree, I mean, she huffed and she puffed and she threw a temper tantrum, and she went abroad for a year. She's not come back. She came back, she finished her degree, and she loved it that much that she's now working for a company that works across the world. You know, she comes to Scotland twice a year as part of her work, and, you know, the occasional big birthdays, you know, because we're all getting to that age now, we get big birthdays. So, you know, she comes back for that, but for me that's massive. From someone who we literally had to drag to the airport, kicking and screaming, has went, and she's never been, you know, away without mum and dad before. And it's completely changed her life. And when she got wind of that we were doing this, she was like, oh, what can I do? This is amazing, like, what can I do? And she got our company to talk to us about it. And like, that's why we've done a lot of work with employers. So this is, like, you can have a look at it, but this is basically going through like the employers that we spoke to, what they've said about study abroad, the experience, the benefits of it. So, you know, again, I think it's a two-pronged approach, but also if it's not working with staff, then get together with your students, and if it's students and staff with qualitative and quantitative data, I really find it hard that any management could argue against that. And if they do, then, you know, maybe we just need to look at another way, but you know, that's one way that I see it. Like, I think it's powerful if you have student and staff together. It's that partnership aspect. Get local businesses involved in it as well. If you've got local businesses, students, staff, and both sets of data, how can anyone argue with it? So, yourself.
Hi, thanks. I'm Scott Burgess from Northumbria. Thank you very much for the presentation. I find that the work of NUS Scotland very, very useful, and I'm not sure if I missed something in it. I've had a related question, and I wondered if NUS Scotland had taken a policy position on advocating mandatory mobility periods in degree programmes, which do exist in discrete programmes.
Okay.
And not mandatory in the sense mandatory for the institution to provide the possibility, but mandatory for the student to secure the qualification. Okay,
so the way that we decide policy in NUS is through our annual conference, and it's NUS Scotland Conference. This work, because we are funded by the Scottish Government, now sits outside of our policy work. It sits in our charity side of the organisation. So what that does is we come up with recommendations of what businesses, government, external stakeholders, universities, colleges, any kind of schools, like what they should do for international, for the international project. So we don't create any policy. We'll give recommendations. We'll do responses to any, you know, pieces of policy that the government put out. We will do responses from students and from a professional angle. You know, what we think, what our research has provided us, and we do a lot of guidance work with, like, obviously the government and institutions. We found it quite hard to get, like, lots of people engaged in the process. It's taken time, but actually the difference between, you know, when we started this, you know, in 2010 to where we are just now, you know, because of the funding aspect as well, obviously we have to reapply for funding. So yeah, we don't necessarily complete any, like, policy, like us have standard policy. We don't do that. We inform on policy. Yeah.
Then is there a recommendation concerning mandatory mobility?
You can have a look at this.
Sure.
And I'd be lying if I knew it all off the top of my head, because that would just be an absolute lie. I mean, like, part of our recommendations, it says deeper analysis of the Scottish domiciled Erasmus demographic. You know, that's lots of buzzwords. But, you know, it's giving you the headers, like, this is the areas that we think that as part of this work that the government should be focusing on, institutions should be focusing on. Centralisation data collection system, because actually, as I just said about GCU, so Glasgow Caledonian University, 89% of their outward mobility is not recorded. So, like, that's a massive problem, and it's not recorded because it's not Erasmus. It's short-term mobility. So that's what I was saying about having a centralised, you know, place where we can actually record and, you know, accredit the work that students are actually doing. And our institutional collaboration. Emphasis on widening participation in study abroad. So not just going for, you know, the students that normally take it up. It's about looking at from people from SMD 20 backgrounds, another buzzword, You know, so the kind of, you know, socially deprived areas within you know, your local area, yeah, are they students, you know, if they're in education, if they're in university or college, like, are they getting the same opportunities? So it's having conversations like that. Provision of short-term mobility windows, students' mobility statements from a, so it's the accrediting bodies stuff that we need to look at as well. Increase employer engagement and the creation of a national mobility agency. That's our recommendations. You're quite happy to, you know,
Sure.
like, have a read at it, not a problem. But that's our key recommendations. And you know, over the next kind of 6 to 8 months, we have a massive event coming up where, you know, employers are quite heavily involved in the process, which is quite exciting. And actually, like, some of the feedback we're already getting, you know, we've had like events at the Parliament where politicians are going, wait a minute, I didn't know that. I didn't know this, I didn't know that. I was like, well, you should read our research, it's really good. So it's things like that I think is really important. You know, highlighting the key opportunities, the benefits, and then, you know, teaming that up with the recommendations. I think it kind of ties in kind of quite nicely, kind of what I've said this morning. But, you know, feel free that you can all, you know, steal a copy of this, have a read at it, and we can get more copies sent down to Viv. Is there any more questions before I go and... Yep.
Maxine Greaves, Sheffield University.
Hi.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it's just come out with a bit of a statement, so this is an example. We had last year, for the first time, over several years, work experience for students in local schools and colleges. For the first time last October, we ran one with German students. It was the first time we'd actually had young apprentices in the university from Europe then. In the discussions with those young people, like you said, in schools they have that conversation, and what we were trying to do after having a conversation with them coming here and enjoying their experience working with myself and colleagues around the university, was that kind of like there's a bit of a gap in terms of our students being able to have that access. And I'm having difficulty at the moment replicating that, because people are saying there's not the money, there's not the infrastructure, who's going to lead on it, etc. So I was heartened by the fact that you were saying that we need to work with schools, we need to work with colleges, actually to extend the global horizon for our young people. Those German students came here, 2 of them. Their English was fluent. Luckily for me, I don't speak German, but a colleague was able to translate some of the things for me to do the paperwork. So I learned from that experience. They also went into our local schools and spoke to young people about, you know, life in Germany, life as in the sixth form, life as a young apprentice. And I think that's invaluable for young people. And like you were saying, if you don't see it, you can't replicate it. But it's just getting the infrastructure in place. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, we have an online resource for schools, and it's a module that they work through. And like we pick schools from, like, not the traditional schools that we would have picked. We picked schools kind of scattered across the central belt, and they're now working through this module online. They're doing it within guidance hours, or what used to be career time, but also, like, we've managed to sell it to the school, and kind of really, you know, sell it on the benefits and saying, well, actually, is it not about time that we really opened the horizon up? And we have to be mindful of, you know, cuts, you know, and stuff like that that's happening within the economic downfall at the moment. Like, we have to bear that in mind. But I think that's why, like, if part of our funding bid last year, we said that it's absolutely vital that we work with schools, because if it's all fine having infrastructure, it's all fine, you know, dealing with structural barriers and, you know, everything like that. It's a hell of a lot harder to change a culture, and that's what we're trying to do here. We can put, you know, structures and, you know, policies and procedures in place, but actually, if we don't start to tackle the culture and the mindset, and you know, also, like, there's a lot of students that come to college or university have been told, you know, like, listen, like, you're never going to get anywhere, like, you're never going to achieve anything. So on top of a culture, you're having to tackle that sort of culture as well. So it can be swings and roundabouts, but I think we've proven in Scotland that you know, it can be done. We've yet to see of what's going to come of the schools work, and we're hoping to expand it. But actually we've got so far now, like it's just so exciting to see that, you know, we've managed to, you know, stick our head above the parapet and say, actually, enough's enough, we need to tackle this. So it's encouraging to hear, and that's great. And that's the sort of stuff that you should be selling to academics, to your institution, on how it actually works and what, you know, what effect that is. You know, if you'd done a follow-up interview with the German students who went back to Germany,
They've got them on video.
well, there you go. So you've got them post coming, and then yeah, you know, before they came and after they came. Like, that is massive, and you can actually tell the difference. So that, again, you know, that's another tool that we use to kind of fling that back. Is there any other questions? No? Yeah?